Hi, everybody. Welcome to Mark's Backyard Birds. A very popular topic in the spring is, of course, the Oriole presence, and we call it the Oriole season at your bird feeders. A lot of questions about it, and so many times people come in late in the season and go, "When do I need to put out my Oriole feeder?" Well, if you wait too late, for many of us, you're going to miss it because the tip for a lot of us, if they don't nest in your yard or really close to your yard, usually the Oriole season only lasts for that earliest part of when they arrive to until they can settle in, to find a nesting site, or move on to much points further north, than us here in Kansas City. So today's program is geared to help you to get ready for the Orioles, make sure you have it out in time, and a little primer on how to separate them. Because I know some of you live in areas where there are a couple of different species, maybe even three different species of Orioles where you are. And we have two consistently here in the Kansas City region. So I'm going to carry how you can separate male, female, and young. So, well, let's get started. The guest of honor today are the Orioles. And this picture, it is an adult male Baltimore Oriole and an adult male Orchard Oriole. And they are very, very uh, colorful and welcome at your bird feeders. Really brighten up the day when you see those. So, when do they arrive? When do you need to be ready? Well, typically, they arrive in the Kansas City region. We always say around tax day. Now, the bulk of them won't arrive or come through until the latter part of April and the first week of May. But if you want to be ready for them, you want to have out your feeders, I'd say by the middle of April at least. Now, you guys to the north, a little bit later, you guys to the south, a little bit early. So, like right now, how did this whole Oriole thing get started? Well, people with hummingbird feeders, especially in the southern tier states of the United States, uh, started noticing these bright orange and black birds landing on their hummingbird feeders. And they would, of course, a lot of times they would damage the feeders or they would pop off the flowers and the bee baskets on them because the opening was too small for them to really take advantage of, but they would drink the nectar. And so sugar water is one of the things that are a big appeal to attracting Orioles, especially in the early days. Now that has evolved. Oriole nectar is 6 parts water to 1 part sugar, whereas hummingbird feeders are 4 to 1. So if you have a dedicated liquid or nectar Oriole feeder, make sure you're mixing up around that 6 to 1. Now I always say if that Oriole tastes that 4 to 1 sugar water in the hummingbird feeder, that's what he's going to want. Like kids in a candy store, they want the sweetest thing possible. That's how that works. But we recommend 6 to 1 for the Orioles. Is the orange color necessary? Just like with hummingbirds, no, clear nectar is fine. But know that when attracting the Orioles, that orange color does seem to help bring them in. So the other thing that people started noticing, this is back in the 70s when this kind of got started, and then people would notice, especially in again those southern tier states where a lot of people have fruit trees in their yards, they noticed that these Orioles were landing on like oranges or grapefruits or lemons that had fallen to the ground, or they started pecking into them and eating the pulp out of them. This is a grapefruit, and this is an Altamira Oriole, which is down along the Rio Grande River, is where it occurs. Doesn't get much further than that, a little bit, but they people say, oh, they only eat oranges. No, they eat grapefruits and they eat lemons and things like that. So those people who would grow those on trees down there would often cut some of them up and stop them, just like this, a great example, stop them on a little limb, and then the Orioles would eat that pulp. Well, again, there's a market. There's, the hummingbird feeders perches were too small, the flower openings were too small, so start catering to the Orioles. Some ingenious person. This, in my opinion, I don't know if there was a really dedicated Oriole feeder, especially a 3-in-1 Oriole feeder, until this one is called the Oriolefest on the market, and that has been our bestseller for ever. And the reason I like it so much is if you've never attracted Orioles, it gives you the opportunity to present all three things, especially in spring migration, these birds are looking for. Of course, it's like a hummingbird feeder with bigger perches that for the sugar water in the center. And these you can cut a grapefruit in half, an orange in half, lemon in half, or quarters, and stab through the stem through that so it doesn't fall off your feeder for the access to pulp. And then it has 4 divots around it that you can put grape jelly in. How the grape jelly thing got started, I've never heard anybody take credit for it, but they absolutely love it. Now, grape jelly, we recommend grape jellies with no high fructose corn syrup in it. The natural jellies, the natural sugars, are not ones that have artificial sweeteners in them either. We prefer the jellies with real sugar in the jelly. So, but they will go through that, and they in the spring when they're first arriving, and the other part of this talk, I promise to tell you about why some years are better than others. And again, of course, timing is everything. And birds migrate. The songbirds, like the Orioles, migrate at night. And of course, they tend to migrate on nights when they got a good, strong south wind behind them. So when they're coming in, some years we'll get these periods of 5, 6, 7 days right in this peak migration in the middle of April to the end of April. And a lot of these birds that nest much further north of you get pushed through rather quickly. For a bird watcher, ideal situation is a night or so of south wind blowing the birds in, and then it shifts out of the north, and then it locks them into where they are, and we get to see them longer. We get to see them eating, and refueling, and they come into our feeders. Well, sometimes even with ideal conditions, they're not coming to the feeders as strong. And why is that? Because it's all dependent upon what's happening in nature at the time. So if you've got an early spring where trees bud out, flowers bloom, especially native flowers. I don't want to say things like, the non-native flowers that are not on the real timing of your native vegetation in your area. This is a black locust tree. And I know for sure, and this picture illustrates it beautifully, how much they love the nectar from black locust blooms. And there's usually tons of them when they do bloom. So if it's a late spring, and things are way behind, when the Orioles come in and the black locusts aren't blooming, or other native flowers aren't blooming as well, especially trees, then the Orioles tend to hit your bird feeder even harder in years like that. If they come in and there's just tons of flowers available up in the trees for them to feed on, you tend not to get the activity at your feeders. And people go, I had tons last year, I don't have any this year. And that can happen. That's what it is part of nature dealing you a blow. Now, several years ago, we had the Easter freeze, as we called it. And we had 10 straight days of like single digit or teens, things like that right here. And it killed all the blossoms on the trees, killed all the early insects that were hatching. That year, the feeders were so covered in orioles and grosbeaks and buntings because, that snap really dealt Mother Nature a harsh blow. And so the feeders were going crazy. So, I often say if it's good for the bird watcher, then it's bad for the birds. Or if it's bad for the bird watcher, then it's good for the birds. And that was an example of that. And so, we always hope for, not to be hard for the birds, but it'll at least put them in so we can enjoy the show for a couple of weeks. So know that environmental conditions certainly do play a part in whether you're going to have a lot of visitation at your feeders or not much visitation. And the other food source, I would definitely want to mention this, is if you have these birds hanging around, a lot of times they come in and the show's about 2 weeks. From the time they arrive and they hit your feeders really well, and you hear them starting to sing and things like that, and then boom, all of a sudden they're gone out of your yard. My wife hates that. She loves the Orioles, but she hates it when the Orioles leave. Like, you're the bird man. Why can't you get them to stay? Well, if where you live, if the trees are not to meet standards of the females to want to build a nest, then they move on. They get that energy hit from coming in and feeding, and then they're able to carry on further. So you remember the birds you may see in your yard here in Kansas City might nest in northern Wisconsin. They're keeping going. So you want them around, and if you do see them, stay longer. If you see them at past mid-May, then there's a good chance they're going to nest pretty close to you. And this is when we recommend with the jelly, start switching that jelly out to mealworms, because they get used to mealworms to feed their babies, then that is a real advantage for them. And they don't need that the sugar jelly, like they do those insects. So learn to switch those things, so those divots that have the jelly in it, to mealworms, and you'll be doing your Orioles a big favor. So what Orioles do we have? Of course, this being the classic Baltimore Oriole that is so famous. And one thing I wanted to point out, whenever seeing them at your feeder, one of the easy assumptions is it's adult male up here in the upper left, and this is a female on the right. And people are like, well, anything that looks like that, got to be male, female. Look at this bottom left bird. This is a juvie male. This is his first year returning back from migration, and he doesn't have that solid black head. And this is, you can see juvenile males that look a lot like an adult female. And so the line for identifying those, you really have to study it pretty well. But it can be really hard to tell the difference between an adult female and a juvenile male. So just know that. But the adult male is so unmistakable. You see that gorgeous orange and black. The western counterpart of the Baltimore Oriole is the Bullock's Oriole. And it's at one time they were considered the same species. That Bullock's was just the western race, but now they've separated them back out. Bullock's, again, they had that much wider white wing patch on them. Beautiful birds, just stunning orange on them. So, and then another really widespread one, of course, the Orchard Oriole. And this one's really confusing for a lot of people. Again, that adult male, that burnt orange, just a beautiful color in black. They're a little bit smaller than the Baltimores, but the adult female, they're consistently this really nice crisp yellow in the two wing patches there. But the bird that confuses a lot of the birds, especially beginning bird watchers, is the bird on the right, and that is a juvenile male Orchard Oriole, and it's this yellowish green color and has this black throat on it, and that's what it's going to look like in that early part of its first full year returning to your feeders, and then it's going to gradually molt and look like the adult male up there in the upper left. So that first year male Orchard Oriole can be very confusing, and believe me, you're not alone if it fools you. Oh, this is a Hooded Oriole, which is the other from the southwestern U.S. I guess, come from Texas and up a little bit and over to the West Coast. They're a dry country bird for sure. This is a male and female here. You get a better picture of a male. When you're talking about Hooded Orioles, I remember when I take my groups bird watching, especially when we're down in Arizona and places where we see the Hooded Orioles, and it's inevitably I say, oh, that's a Hooded Oriole, and they look at me and go, hooded? I said, you have to think of the orange as the hood. You think hood to be black. Well, this Hooded Oriole, the orange is the hood and the black is the skin, that you would see with a hood. So these are really nice, long, stout bills on them, and then the male and the female there. So that great pictures. You guys are sending your pictures to me for use. Thank you so much. And your photo credits are below down in the program description. Always look at that. So. Great idea for programs. Orioles are a big topic here in the spring, and they're coming into the south of us, and they're going to be rolling in here in the next couple of weeks. So get your feeders ready for them. Remember, sugar nectar for them, or grape jelly, or a citrus. Oranges are the most popular, and then later on the mealworms. So don't miss the Oriole season. That's the message today. So if you would, give us a like, give us a share. And if you're on YouTube and you haven't subscribed, please do, and hit that bell that will get you notifications when I'm on next. Until next time, let's talk birds.